Hello and welcome to Cozy Mysteries channel, where every story feels like a conversation over a warm cup of coffee. Today we delve into one of Sherlock Holmes's most chilling holiday adventures, a tale of shadows amid the cheer of Yuletide. Settle in, dear listeners, as I, Dr. John H. Watson, recount the events of Sherlock Holmes and the holiday case Shadows of Yuletide. Chapter 1. The Festive Visitor. It was the 22nd of December, and London had donned her festive garb with a vengeance. From our sitting room window, I could see the street below transformed into a living Christmas card. Holly wreaths upon every lamppost, paper chains fluttering above the butcher's shop, and a choir of charity children in scarlet mufflers singing Good King Wenceslas with breath that plumed white in the frost. Handsome cabs jingled past, their wheels muffled by the fresh fall, and the very air seemed sweetened with the aroma of spiced oranges and hot chestnuts sold from glowing braziers. Yet for all the merriment, a curious melancholy hung about the season, as though the city itself sensed that joy and sorrow are but two sides of the same coin. Sherlock Holmes, however, appeared impervious to both the cheer and the chill. He reclined in his mouse-colored dressing gown, legs stretched toward the blazing fire, a litter of chemical apparatus scattered across the deal table. A retort bubbled gently over a spirit lamp, exhaling a thin, acrid vapor that curled like a genie toward the ceiling. His violin lay across his knees, untouched. Instead, he held a small glass phial to the lamplight, watching the play of color within with the absorption of a child at a kaleidoscope. "Watson," he remarked without looking up, "do you observe the precipitate? A delicate rose matter quite unmistakable, the merest trace of human blood aged approximately 72 hours, diluted in snow water. Curious, is it not, that the season of peace should yield such evidence of violence?" I had just returned from my constitutional, my boots still crusted with slush from Regent Street, and the contrast between the festive bustle outside and the grim nature of his experiment struck me forcibly. "Holmes," I replied, shaking snow from my ulster, "must you dissect murder even at Christmas? The streets are alive with goodwill, even the crossing sweepers are singing carols." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Goodwill, my dear fellow, is the thinnest of veneers. Beneath it lies the same heart that beats in every season, capable of generosity, yes, but equally of treachery. Mark my words, before the bells ring in the new year, we shall have work enough to occupy us." As if in answer to his prophecy, there came a sharp rat-tat at the door below, followed by the measured tread of Mrs. Hudson upon the stairs. Our good landlady entered, bearing a card upon a salver. Snowflakes still clung to the hem of her apron, and her cheeks were rosy with cold. "A lady to see you, Mr. Holmes," she announced, a note of concern in her voice. "Miss Eleanor Hargrove," she says, "in a rare taking, poor soul, and on such a night. I've put the kettle on. She looks as though she could do with something hot inside her." Holmes's eyes gleamed with sudden interest. He set aside the phial and rose with the fluid grace of a panther. "Show her up at once, Mrs. Hudson, and Watson. Brandy, if you please. Our visitor will need fortification against more than the weather." Close up on the calling card, creamstock, black border, the name Miss Eleanor Hargrove embossed in elegant script. Cut to the door opening, a gust of snow swirls in. The lady who entered was a vision of distressed elegance. She was perhaps 30 years of age, tall and slender, with the kind of beauty that seems carved from alabaster. Pale skin, raven hair escaping in tendrils from beneath a fur-trimmed bonnet, and eyes of a green so deep they might have been cut from the heart of a forest. Her traveling cloak of bottle green velvet was dusted with snow, and her gloved hands clutched a lace handkerchief as though it were a lifeline. Yet for all her poise, there was a tremor in her carriage, a fragility that spoke of some inner storm. Mr. Sherlock Holmes? Her voice was low, musical, but edged with desperation. They told me in the village that if any man could unravel a mystery, it was you. I have come from Hampstead, from Hargrove Manor. My brother— Here her composure cracked. The handkerchief rose to her lips. My brother, Sir Reginald Hargrove, has vanished. 3 nights ago, during our annual yuletide ball, he stepped into the garden for a breath of air and simply disappeared. The snow was untouched, the gates locked, the dogs silent. The police speak of accident, of drunken wandering, but I know it is something far worse. Holmes had already ushered her to the fireside chair, pressing a glass of brandy into her hand. I noted the subtle details his gaze catalogued even as he spoke. The mud upon her hem, Surrey clay, not London. The faint scent of cloves clinging to her cloak, the tremor in her left eyelid that betrayed sleepless nights. He himself remained standing, one hand upon the mantel, the firelight gilding the sharp planes of his face. "Pray compose yourself, Miss Hargrove," he said gently, "and begin at the beginning. Every detail, however trivial, may prove vital. Watson, your notebook." I obeyed, settling into my accustomed place with pencil poised. Outside, the wind rattled the window panes like impatient fingers, and somewhere in the distance a church bell tolled the hour. Miss Hargrove drew a steadying breath and began her tale. Slow zoom on Eleanor's face as she speaks, intercut with flashbacks, snow falling on a grand manor house, laughter and music spilling from lighted windows. "Hargrove Manor has been in our family for 6 generations, she said. "It stands upon the edge of Hampstead Heath, surrounded by gardens that slope down to a frozen lake. Every Christmas we hold a ball, the culmination of the season's festivities. This year we had nearly 50 guests, cousins from Scotland, business associates of my brothers from the East India trade. Even a minor princeling from Bavaria who had taken lodgings in town. The house was ablaze with light, hundreds of candles, garlands of evergreen, a tree in the entrance hall that touched the ceiling and was hung with crystal icicles that chimed like fairy bells. Reginald, Sir Reginald, was the perfect host. He had returned only a fortnight earlier from Calcutta, laden with curiosities. A cashmere shawl for me, a narwhal tusk for the hall, and crates of spices whose fragrance filled the corridors, cloves, cardamom, saffron, enough to scent a cathedral. He was in riotous spirits, distributing gifts, leading the toasts. "To absent friends," he cried, raising a glass of mulled wine, and for a moment the shadows seemed banished. It was just after midnight when he excused himself. "I need a breath of air," he told me, pressing a kiss to my forehead. "The conservatory is stifling." I thought nothing of it. The French windows open onto the terrace, and the snow was falling softly like feathers from an angel's wing. He wore no overcoat, only his evening dress and a crimson silk scarf I had given him the year before. I watched him cross the ballroom, nodding to guests, and then he was gone. An hour passed. The dancing continued. The orchestra played the Skater's Waltz, but I grew uneasy. I sent the footman to search the terrace. Nothing. The garden. Nothing. The snow lay in a perfect unbroken sheet from the house to the lake, save for the faint prints of birds and once a fox. No human footprint marred the expanse. The gates were bolted from within, the walls too high for climbing without a ladder, and no ladder was missing. The dogs in the kennels never barked. It was as though the earth had opened and swallowed him whole. Here she paused, her breath hitching. Holmes's eyes had narrowed to slits. He was leaning forward now, every sense alert. "Continue," he urged softly. "At dawn, we summoned the local constabulary. Inspector Lestrade's cousin, a man named Gregson, arrived with a posse. They dragged the lake. Ice had to be broken with picks. but found only a child's lost mitten. They searched the outbuildings, the attics, even the wine cellar where Reginald sometimes retreated to sample a new vintage. Nothing. Gregson muttered about gentlemen who take French leave after too much punch, but I saw the fear in the servants' eyes. Whispers began almost at once, of the Hargrove curse, of an ancestor who vanished in the Indian Mutiny, of ghosts that walk the heath on moonless nights. By evening the guests had fled and the manor stands empty save for the staff and me. She reached into her reticule and drew forth a small object wrapped in silk. Unfolding the cloth, she revealed a gentleman's gold cufflink engraved with the Hargrove crest, a stag rampant beneath a crescent moon. "This was found yesterday," she whispered, "caught in the branches of the yew tree at the garden's edge. The tree stands 20 feet from the terrace. How did it come to be there? And why is there a stain upon the gold? Dark, almost black, like dried blood." Holmes took the cufflink between thumb and forefinger, holding it to the lamplight. I saw the stain she spoke of, a crescent-shaped mark that might indeed have been blood, or merely the tarnish of age. With a lens he examined it minutely, then sniffed delicately. "Clove oil," he murmured, "and something else? Opium, perhaps? Your brother's trade, I take it?" Miss Hargrove nodded. "He imported spices, yes, but there were rumors, shipments that arrived under cover of night, crates sealed with wax the color of blood. He laughed them off, but 2 weeks ago he received a letter, unsigned, written in a spidery hand. He grew pale as he read it, then burned it in the library fire. When I asked what troubled him, he said only, 'Old debts, Eleanor, debts that follow a man across oceans.'" Close up on the cufflink spinning slowly in Holmes's fingers. Flashback to a shadowed figure burning a letter, flames reflecting in anxious eyes. Holmes returned the cufflink to its silk wrapping and handed it back. "Miss Hargrove, you have done well to come to me. The police see what they expect to see. I see what is. Watson and I will accompany you to Hargrove Manor at first light. Pack nothing that cannot be carried in a Gladstone bag. We may need to move quickly, and one thing more." His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Trust no one in that house, not even those closest to you. The purest snow may conceal the deepest abyss." She rose, steadying herself against the chair. The brandy had restored some color to her cheeks, but her eyes remained haunted. "You will come, then? You will find him, alive or more otherwise?" "I will find the truth," Holmes replied, and in those simple words lay a promise as binding as any oath. Mrs. Hudson showed her out, and I heard the street door close with a soft thud. Snow had begun to fall more heavily. Through the window I watched Miss Hargrove's cloaked figure vanish into the swirling white, the yellow glow of a hansome's lamps briefly illuminating her before she was swallowed by the night. Holmes stood motionless for a long moment, staring into the fire. At last he spoke, almost to himself. "A disappearance without footprints. A cufflink in a tree. The scent of cloves and opium. Watson, we are confronted with a puzzle of rare beauty. Somewhere in that festively adorned manor lies a mechanism as cunning as any clockwork, and I intend to dismantle it piece by piece." He reached for his violin, drew the bow across the strings, in a slow, mournful phrase of "God rest ye merry gentlemen," then set it aside with a smile that held no mirth. "To bed, old friend. Tomorrow we venture into the lion's den, or should I say, the stag's lair, for by this time tomorrow the shadows of Yuletide will have a name." I retired to my room, but sleep was long in coming. Outside, the snow continued to fall, erasing the footprints of the day, and somewhere in the darkness a church clock struck 2. Little did I know that before the week was out, the bells of Christmas would ring over a tale of greed, betrayal, and a ruby redder than any holly berry. A tale that would test even Sherlock Holmes's powers to their utmost. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Snow. The morning of the 23rd of December broke gray and sullen. The sky a low lid of cloud that pressed upon London like the palm of a giant hand. Snow had fallen thickly in the night. The streets lay muffled, the cries of newsboys and muffin men softened to a murmur. Sherlock Holmes and I descended the 17 steps of 221B Baker Street at 7:30, our breath pluming white before us. A four-wheeler waited at the curb, its horse pawing impatiently at the frozen cobbles. And Miss Eleanor Hargrove sat within, veiled and silent, her gloved hands clasped upon a small traveling rug. Dawn over Baker Street, snow-laden roofs, a lone constable stamping warmth into his boots. The cab door opens. Holmes hands Eleanor inside with courtly grace. Holmes wore his ear-flapped traveling cap and a heavy ulster. I carried a Gladstone bag containing my service revolver and a packet of sandwiches Mrs. Hudson had pressed upon us against the hunger of detection. As the cab lurched forward, the great city slid past our windows like a dream half-remembered. The shuttered shops of Oxford Street, the skeletal plane trees of Hyde Park, the ice sellers already chipping at their blocks for the evening's punch. At Swiss Cottage, we left the main thoroughfare and climbed the steep, winding road toward Hampstead Heath, where the manor awaited. The journey took an hour, yet Eleanor spoke scarcely a dozen words. Once, as we passed a group of children sliding upon a frozen pond, she pressed a hand to the window and murmured, "Reginald taught me to skate there when we were small. He always said the ice sang beneath the blades." Her voice caught. She turned away and the silence settled again, heavier than the snow. Hargrove Manor rose before us at last, a brooding pile of weathered stone, its chimneys exhaling pale ribbons against the leaden sky. Icicles hung like daggers from the eaves. The great front doors, bound in iron, stood open as though the house itself breathed a sigh of welcome or warning. Evergreen garlands still draped the portico, but many had slipped askew and the holly berries looked like drops of blood against the white. The cab wheels crunch to a halt. Snowflakes swirl in the headlights of imagination. The manor looms, Gothic arches, frost-rimed statues of stags flanking the steps. The butler, Thorne, admitted us. He was a tall, gaunt man of 50 with a scar that ran from left ear to chin like a pale lightning bolt. His livery was impeccable, yet his eyes, small, dark, and watchful, betrayed a restlessness that no amount of starch could conceal. "Miss Eleanor," he intoned, bowing stiffly, "the staff is at your disposal. The police left yesterday. The house is yours." Holmes wasted no time. "The garden, if you please," he said, already stripping off his gloves. "Watson, bring the lens." We passed through the entrance hall, still fragrant with pine and cinnamon, and into the ballroom beyond. It was a cavernous space, its ceiling painted with faded frescoes of Diana hunting. The Yule tree stood forlorn in one corner, its candles guttered, needles carpeting the parquet like a green shroud. French windows opened onto the terrace. Beyond lay the garden, a vast white expanse unbroken save for the dark punctuation of yew hedges and the occasional footprint of a robin. Holmes knelt at the threshold, his magnifying glass sweeping the snow in slow arcs. "Observe," he said softly. "The terrace flags are swept clean, no trace of slush carried in upon boots. Yet here," he indicated a faint crescent-shaped depression near the balustrade. "A heel mark, narrow, elegant. A woman's shoe, I fancy, though the snow has half filled it. Curious." Eleanor, who had followed us, gave a start. "That would be mine," she admitted. "I stood here watching Reginald cross the terrace, but his prints, there were none, I swear it." Holmes merely nodded and stepped down into the garden proper. The cold was bitter, my ears ached within minutes. He moved like a bloodhound, now crouching, now straightening, his breath forming brief clouds that vanished as quickly as they came. At the yew tree where the cufflink had been found, he paused longest, fingers brushing the bark. "Claw marks," he murmured. "A cat, perhaps, or—" He broke off, eyes narrowing. "No. Too regular. Someone climbed here using the branches as handholds. See the broken twig? Fresh sap still beads the wound." He produced a small envelope and dropped the twig inside. "Evidence, Watson." From the yew, he proceeded to the conservatory. A glass fantasia filled with exotic palms and the heavy scent of forced hyacinths. The door stood ajar. Inside, the air was humid, almost tropical. Holmes's gaze swept the tiled floor, the wicker furniture, the fountain that trickled disconsolately into a lily-choked basin. Upon a side table lay a silver tray bearing a single glass, half full of mulled wine, its surface skimmed with ice. "Reginald's?" Holmes asked. Eleanor nodded. "He carried it from the ballroom. The footman saw him set it down here." Holmes lifted the glass, sniffed, then touched the rim with a finger. "Clove again, stronger here, and something else. Laudanum, I shouldn't wonder." He decanted a drop onto a strip of litmus, watched the color change, and gave a satisfied grunt. "Enough to fell a horse," administered slowly. "Your brother was drugged, Miss Hargrove, and led or carried away." Close up on the mulled wine, crimson surface, a single clove floating like a tiny boat. Holmes's lens reflects the liquid's menace. We returned to the house. In the entrance hall, Holmes paused before a suit of armor, its visor raised to reveal empty darkness within. "Curious," he said again, tapping the breastplate. It rang hollow. "This was moved recently. Note the scratches upon the floor." He swung the visor down. Something glinted within. Reaching in, he drew forth a scrap of crimson silk, torn, stained with what might have been mud or blood. Eleanor gasped. "His scarf! The one I gave him!" Holmes folded the silk carefully. "Silk tears cleanly. This was cut. Someone wished us to find it." He turned to Thorne, who hovered nearby. "The staff. Assemble them in the servants' hall. I would speak with each." While the butler departed, Holmes led us to the library. A somber room paneled in oak, its shelves groaning beneath calf-bound volumes and curios from the Orient. A jade Buddha, a tiger's claw mounted in gold, a hookah with a mouthpiece of amber. Upon the desk lay an open ledger. The last entry in a bold hand read, "RK. Final shipment arrives 24th. Ruby to be concealed in tree." "RK," Holmes mused. "Initials or a cipher? And a ruby, blood red, I'll wager, and worth a Raja's ransom." He closed the book with a snap. "Your brother played a dangerous game, Miss Hargrove. Spices were his ostensible trade. Gems and opium were the true cargo." The ledger page. Ink still glossy. The word ruby underlined thrice. Outside, snow begins to fall again, soft as whispered secrets. From the corridor came the shuffle of feet. The staff had assembled, cook, housemaids, a trembling scullery boy, and last of all, a stable lad with straw in his hair and fear in his eyes. Holmes questioned them swiftly, his voice calm yet edged with steel. Most claimed to have seen nothing. The cook admitted hearing a cry like a night bird at 12:30. The stable lad, under Holmes's relentless gaze, confessed to finding a ladder missing from the loft at dawn. "Returned by evening," he mumbled, leaning against the potting shed. "I thought nothing of it." Holmes dismissed them with a nod. To Eleanor he said, "Your brother was removed via the conservatory, drugged, bundled onto a ladder, and carried over the wall. The snow hid the accomplice's retreat. The scarf and cufflink were planted to suggest struggle. But why? Blackmail, ransom, or something darker?" As we stood in the library, a gust of wind rattled the casements. Somewhere in the house, a door slammed. Eleanor shivered. "There are whispers," she said softly. "The servants speak of footsteps in empty corridors, of candles that gutter though no draught stirs them. They say the manor is cursed." Holmes smiled thinly. "Cursed by greed, perhaps. Come, Watson, there is more to see before nightfall." But as we turned to leave, a faint sound reached us, a low, rhythmic scratching as though something clawed at wood far below. Holmes's head snapped round. "The cellars," he said. "Quickly." Chapter 3. The Gilded Invitation. The scratching in the cellar proved to be a rat worrying at a loose board, yet the incident left an uneasiness that clung like damp wool. Holmes dismissed the staff to their duties, but I noticed that Thorne lingered in the doorway a fraction too long, his scar livid against the pallor of his cheek. Snow had begun to fall again, thick and deliberate, muffling the world beyond the manor's mullioned windows. By 2 o'clock the light was failing. The great house seemed to draw the darkness into itself. A single candle gutters in the library. Outside, snowflakes swirl like white moths against the leaded panes. Close up on Thorne's scar, twitching as he watches Holmes. Holmes spent the afternoon in the library, poring over ledgers and correspondence with the concentration of a monk illuminating a manuscript. Eleanor, pale but composed, brought us tea on a silver tray. Darjeeling steeped to perfection, with thin slices of plum cake that tasted of cloves and regret. I wandered the corridors, revolver in pocket, cataloging the manor's peculiarities. A portrait of a bewigged ancestor whose eyes followed one with disquieting persistence. A long case clock that struck 13 at noon. A tapestry in the west wing depicting a stag brought down by shadowy hunters. At 4 o'clock, Holmes summoned Eleanor and Thorne to the study. The fire had been laid anew. Its crackle was the only sound save the wind's low moan in the chimney. "Mr. Thorne," Holmes began without preamble, "you served with Sir Reginald in Calcutta, did you not? The scar upon your face, sabred by a thug in the mutiny, I believe." The butler inclined his head. "Aye, sir. 57. The master pulled me from a burning bungalow. Saved my life, he did." "Yet gratitude is a fragile currency," Holmes observed. "Your wages are in arrears 3 quarters. The household accounts show withdrawals signed by you, small sums but regular. Embezzlement, perhaps." Thorne's composure cracked like thin ice. I took only what was owed me for extra duties, sir. Sir Reginald promised a bonus from the ruby shipment," Holmes finished. "The stone mentioned in the ledger. Where is it, Thorne?" The butler's eyes darted to Eleanor, who had gone white as the snow outside. "I know nothing of rubies," he muttered, but his hands betrayed him, twisting the hem of his coat until the seams threatened to part. Holmes waved him away. "We shall speak again. Miss Hargrove, your brother's London associates. Victor Langford chief among them. I require his direction." Eleanor provided it, a warehouse in Wapping near the Pool of London. "Victor and Reginald were partners once," she said, "but quarreled over a consignment lost at sea. There was talk of insurance fraud. Victor came to the ball, left early after a furious row in the smoking room." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Excellent. Watson, we depart for town at first light. Tonight we set a watch." Thorne retreating down the corridor, his shadow long and wavering. Cut to a map of London unrolled on the desk, Holmes's finger tracing the Thames to Wapping. Darkness fell early, the snow ceasing as suddenly as it had begun. The manor settled into an uneasy quiet, broken only by the creak of old beams and the occasional thud of a falling icicle. Holmes and I took turns patrolling the ground floor, lanterns hooded to a slit. At 11 o'clock, I relieved him in the ballroom. He had stationed himself in the conservatory, reasoning that any intruder must return to the scene of the abduction. The Yule tree loomed like a watchful sentinel, its crystal icicles chiming softly in the draught. I had just passed the French windows when a sound arrested me. A faint metallic click from the terrace. Heart pounding, I extinguished my lantern and peered through the glass. A figure stood beneath the yew tree, cloaked, hooded, motionless. Snowflakes settled on the dark wool like stars upon midnight. In one gloved hand glinted something small and golden, an invitation card, its edges catching the moonlight. The figure raised it as though in salute, then placed it deliberately upon the balustrade before melting back into the shadows. I burst through the doors, revolver drawn, but the garden lay empty. Only the card remained half buried in fresh snow. I snatched it up and hurried to the conservatory. Holmes examined the card beneath his lens. It was heavy vellum, bordered in gold leaf, bearing an embossed crest, a phoenix rising from flames. The inscription in crimson ink read, "You are summoned to the Order of the Gilded Hearth, midnight, St. Dunstan's Crypt, Fleet Street, come alone. Speak of this to none. The ruby awaits." Anonymous yet exquisitely crafted, Holmes murmured. The paper is handmade, Italian watermarked with the arms of Venice. The ink contains cochineal, costly. Our correspondent is wealthy and impatient. He turned the card over. On the reverse, a single drop of wax sealed a tiny compartment. Prying it open, he revealed a flake of dried blood. "Reginald's?" I asked. "Possibly, or a warning." Holmes pocketed the card. "We attend this midnight conclave, Watson, but first, sleep. Tomorrow promises to be strenuous." The golden card glowing under lamplight, the phoenix crest seems almost to move. Fade to the crypt's arched entrance, torchlight flickering on ancient stones. We left Hargrove Manor at dawn, the sky a hollow, dull pewter. The snow crunched to ice beneath the cab's wheels. London awoke sluggishly, milk carts rattling, chimneys belching smoke that hung low in the frost. By 9 o'clock we stood before Langford's warehouse in Wapping, a cavernous brick structure reeking of pepper and decay. The Thames lapped greasily at the wharf, gulls wheeled overhead screaming like lost souls. Victor Langford was a bull of a man, florid and loud in a checked waistcoat. He received us in an office cluttered with spice sacks and ledgers, a decanter of port already open though the hour was early. "Reginald Hargrove," he bellowed, pouring generous measures. "A fine fellow till he turned sanctimonious. Owed me 20,000 for a cargo of cloves. Claimed the ship sank, but I've proof it docked in Antwerp. We argued at the ball, yes, I'll not deny it. He accused me of scuttling the vessel for insurance. I told him to his face he was a hypocrite, smuggling opium in tea chests while preaching morality. Then I left." Holmes sipped his port, eyes never leaving Langford's face. "And the ruby? A stone the size of a pigeon's egg cut in Mughal style." "You knew of it?" Langford's bluster faltered. "Rumors. Reginald boasted of a Christmas surprise for his sister. I thought it gammon." He leaned forward, voice dropping. "But if the stone exists, it's cursed. Belonged to a Maharaja who murdered his brothers for it. Men who touch it come to bad ends." Holmes produced the gilded invitation. Langford's eyes widened. "The Order of the Gilded Hearth. Secret society of spice merchants. They meet in crypts, swear blood oaths. I was invited once, declined. Fools and fanatics." As we left, Holmes paused at the door. "One more thing, Mr. Langford. Your coat, cashmere, bottle green. You wore it to the ball?" "Aye. Why?" "Because a thread of that exact shade was found upon the yew tree at Hargrove Manor." Holmes's smile was wintry. "Good day?" Langford's face suddenly ashen, cut to the cab splashing through slushy streets, Holmes examining a green thread beneath his lens. Back at Baker Street by dusk, a telegram awaited us from Eleanor. Footprints beneath conservatory window. Ladder returned to loft. Thorn missing since noon. Holmes read it aloud, then crushed the paper in his fist. "The web tightens," he said. "Tonight, Watson, we descend into the crypt. Bring your revolver and a stout heart, for somewhere in the bowels of London the ruby bleeds and Sir Reginald's fate hangs upon its light." Outside, the gas lamps flickered on one by one, casting pools of gold upon the snow. Somewhere a church bell tolled 7. The game, as Holmes was fond of saying, was afoot. Chapter 4. Echoes of the Manor. The hansom that bore us toward Fleet Street rattled through a London transformed by night and snow. Gas lamps glimmered like captive stars. The great dome of St. Paul's loomed above the rooftops, its cross-a pale crucifix against the bruised sky. Holmes sat opposite me, silent, his gloved hands folded upon the head of his stick. The gilded invitation lay between us on the seat, its phoenix crest catching stray gleams of light. At his feet rested a small dispatch case containing the tools of his trade: lens, tape, dark lantern, and a coil of silk rope. Interior of the cab, Holmes's profile sharp against the window, snow streaking past like white bullets. Close up on the invitation, the crimson ink seems wet, almost alive. We alighted at the corner of Fetter Lane. The crypt of St. Dunstan's lay beneath a narrow church squeezed between a printer's shop and a gin palace. Its iron-bound door stood ajar. From within issued a faint rhythmic chanting as though a hive of bees murmured in Latin. A hooded figure in scarlet livery barred our path. "The phoenix rises," he intoned. "From ashes gilded," Holmes replied without hesitation. The phrase had been scratched in microscopic letters on the invitation's reverse. Holmes had spotted it hours earlier. The guardian stepped aside. We descended a spiral of worn stone steps, the air growing warmer and heavier with each turn. Beeswax candles in iron sconces threw wavering shadows upon walls green with damp. At the bottom opened a vaulted chamber, its pillars carved with vines and serpents. Perhaps 30 masked figures stood in a circle, their robes of crimson and gold shimmering like autumn leaves. In the center burned a brazier. Above it hung a cage containing a live phoenix. No, a mechanical bird of brass and rubies, its wings beating slowly, scattering sparks. The crypt, vaulted ceiling lost in darkness, masks gleaming like porcelain moons. The mechanical phoenix whirs, eyes flashing red. A voice, amplified by some acoustic trick, rolled through the chamber. "Brothers of the gilded hearth, the hour of reckoning approaches. The ruby of Rajputana must be returned to the flame, lest the curse consume us all." Holmes's eyes swept the assembly. I followed his gaze. There, half hidden behind a pillar, stood Thorn, his scar unmistakable even beneath a domino mask. And beside him, Lady Beatrice Hargrove, Sir Reginald's aunt, her silver hair coiled beneath a hood of cloth of gold. Her eyes met mine across the brazier. They were cold as winter steel. The chant ceased. A masked officiant raised a chalice. "Drink of the flame and speak your truth." One by one, the figures stepped forward, sipping from the cup. When Thorn's turn came, his hand trembled. A drop of liquid, wine or blood, fell upon his robe, staining it darker. Holmes moved then, swift as a striking hawk. Before the guardian could react, he had slipped behind a pillar and was gone. I remained, heart hammering, until the ceremony ended with a sudden extinguishing of the brazier. Darkness swallowed the chamber. When torches flared again, the assembly had dispersed through side passages like smoke. I found Holmes in an alcove, examining a scrap of parchment dropped in the confusion. "Directions," he whispered. "To a vault beneath Hargrove Manor. The ruby is there, and perhaps Sir Reginald himself." The parchment, ink still wet, a crude map showing the manor's cellars with an X marked beneath the chapel. Fade to the return journey, the cab now racing through empty streets. We reached the manor near 3 in the morning. The snow had ceased. The world lay hushed beneath a crust of ice that crackled beneath our boots. Eleanor met us at the side door, a lantern in her hand, her face drawn with sleepless dread. "Thorne returned an hour ago," she whispered. "He claims he was visiting his sister in Barnet. I do not believe him." Holmes wasted no time. "The chapel. Show us." The family chapel lay at the rear of the west wing, a Gothic gem disused since the old baronet's death. Its windows were boarded. Ivy strangled the buttresses. Inside, dust lay thick upon the pews, and a single stained-glass rose window depicted the martyrdom of Saint Sebastian, arrows of crimson glass piercing a sapphire sky. Holmes moved to the altar, a slab of black marble veined with gold. Beneath it, a flagstone bore the faint outline of the Hargrove crest. "Watson," the crowbar from the gardener's shed. Together we levered up the stone. Beneath lay an iron ring bolted to a trap-door. It opened with a groan that echoed like a dying man's sigh. Stone steps descended into darkness, the air thick with the scent of earth and cloves. The trapdoor yawning, lantern light reveals steps slick with damp. Holmes descends first, his shadow monstrous on the walls. The passage twisted like a serpent's spine, narrowing until we walked single file. At its end opened a brick-vaulted chamber, its walls lined with wine racks, empty save for one bottle, its label inscribed in Hindi. In the center stood a pedestal of teak. Upon it rested a velvet cushion, indented as though something heavy had recently lain there. "The ruby was here," Holmes said. "Removed within the last day. Note the dust undisturbed save for this circle." He knelt, lens to the floor. Footprints, a man's boot size 9 and a smaller, narrower print. Lady Beatrice's, I'll wager. They came together. A low moan issued from the shadows. We spun, revolvers drawn. In the corner, bound and gagged, lay Sir Reginald Hargrove, alive, but sorely used. His evening clothes were torn, his face bruised, yet his eyes blazed with defiance. Holmes cut the ropes with his pocket knife. "Holmes!" the baronet gasped. "Thank God they drugged me, laudanum in the mulled wine, woke in this hole. Beatrice, she and Thorne, they want the ruby. Said I'd smuggled it from India, that it was cursed. Planned to fake my death, sell the stone abroad." "Where is it now?" Holmes demanded. Reginald shook his head. "Hidden. In the one place they'd never look, the mechanical phoenix at the crypt. I swapped it during the ceremony before they trussed me up again." Close up on Reginald's battered face. Behind him, the empty pedestal gleams dully. Cut to flashback. The crypt. Reginald's bound hand slipping the ruby into the bird's hollow breast as the brazier flares. Dawn was graying the sky when we emerged. Eleanor wept to see her brother alive. Thorne, confronted in the servants' hall, collapsed like a house of cards, confessing his part in the abduction for a share of the ruby's price. Lady Beatrice had fled, leaving only a note pinned to her pillow with a jeweled hat pin. The flame consumes its own. Holmes stood at the chapel door, watching the snow begin again. "A pretty puzzle," he mused. "Greed dressed in ritual, abduction masked as curse. Yet the ruby remains in London, Watson, hidden in plain sight among fanatics. We have not seen the last of the gilded hearth." As the manor stirred to life, bells from Hampstead Parish Church rang out across the heath. Clear, joyous, defiant. Christmas Eve had come, but the shadows of Yuletide were far from banished. Chapter 5. The Crimson Stain. Christmas Eve dawned with the sky the color of tarnished pewter, the snow lying in deep, wind-sculpted drifts that swallowed the manor's gravel drive. Sir Reginald Hargrove, bandaged and dosed with brandy-laced coffee, sat wrapped in blankets before the library fire. His ordeal had left him gaunt, but the old fire flickered in his eyes as he recounted the details Holmes pressed from him. The library at dawn, embers glowing, frost spider-webbing the windows. Reginald's bruised knuckles gripped the chair arms. Eleanor kneels beside him, tears frozen on her lashes. "They meant to keep me alive until the ruby was sold," he said hoarsely. Beatrice planned to ship it to Amsterdam on the SS Caledonia sailing Boxing Day. Thorn was her creature, had been for years. He drugged the wine, carried me down the ladder, hid me in the crypt beneath the chapel. The gilded hearth was their cover. The rituals kept the other members from asking questions. Holmes paced, pipe clenched unlit between his teeth. And the mechanical phoenix? "A gift from the Maharaja of Jaipur," Reginald replied. "I smuggled the ruby inside its breast, hollow, lined with velvet. During the ceremony I was to be sacrificed, a mock death to satisfy the fanatics. I palmed the stone, swapped it for a paste copy. Beatrice discovered the switch at dawn. That's when she fled." Holmes stopped before the hearth. "Then the true ruby is still in the crypt of St. Dunstan's, concealed within the bird. We must retrieve it before the Caledonia sails. Watson, telegraph Lestrade. Tell him to meet us at Fleet Street with men. Miss Hargrove, you will remain here with your brother. Lock every door, admit no one." Eleanor's face was pale but resolute. "And Lady Beatrice?" "We'll be halfway to the coast by now," Holmes said grimly. "Unless she returns for the stone she believes genuine." Holmes scribbling the telegram, close up on the words "urgent," St. Dunstan's crypt, ruby theft. Cut to the manor's front door slamming shut, snow swirling in the wake of the departing cab. The journey back to London was a nightmare of ice and delay. Our cab skidded on Blackfriars Bridge. A brewer's dray had overturned, spilling barrels that burst like bombs of foam. By the time we reached Fleet Street, the clocks were striking 11, and the crypt door stood locked, a fresh wreath of holly nailed across it in mocking festivity. Holmes produced a skeleton key. We descended into the familiar vault. The brazier was cold, the mechanical phoenix gone. Only the cage remained, its door hanging open, feathers of brass scattered like fallen leaves. "Taken within the hour," Holmes said, kneeling. "See the scuff marks, 2 sets, one heavy, one light. Beatrice and an accomplice." He followed the trail to a side passage we had not noticed before, its mouth concealed behind a tapestry of the Last Judgment. The air here was colder, laced with the metallic tang of blood. The empty cage swings gently, a single brass feather glints. The tapestry lifts like a curtain, revealing a narrow tunnel glistening with frost. The passage sloped downward, twisting like the burrow of some subterranean beast. Lantern light revealed walls slick with seepage. Our boots echoed on flagstones worn smooth by centuries. After 50 yards, the tunnel opened into a disused charnel house, shelves of skulls grinning in the gloom, tibiae stacked like firewood. In the center lay the mechanical phoenix, its breast torn open, the paste ruby shattered beside it. Holmes's lens swept the scene. Beatrice discovered the deception here. Note the blood. Fresh arterial spray. Someone was wounded. He indicated a trail of crimson droplets leading to an iron-bound door set into the far wall. They've gone below. Into the Fleet sewer, perhaps. The tide is ebbing. They mean to reach the river. We followed the blood through the door and down a spiral of brick steps. The stench hit us like a physical blow, sewage, rot, the sour reek of the Thames at low water. The tunnel was a brick throat, ankle-deep in filth. Rats squealed and fled before our lantern. The blood trail ended at a rusted grating that opened onto the riverbank. Holmes forced the grating. We emerged beneath Southwark Bridge, the tide a black ribbon sliding past. Snow had turned to sleety rain hissing on the water. Footprints, two sets, led along the muddy foreshore toward a cluster of warehouses. One set staggered, the other dragged. The sewer mouth yawns, lantern light catches on swirling water. The footprints, clear in the mud, one leaving bloody smears. Cut to the warehouses, their windows blind with grime. We tracked them to a derelict spice warehouse, its sign half effaced. Langford and Sue. The door hung ajar. Inside, the air was thick with pepper and decay. Sacks had burst, their contents staining the floor like rust. In the center of the main room lay Victor Langford, bound and gagged, his bottle-green coat torn, a gash above his eye, weeping blood. Holmes cut him free. Langford spat out the gag, voice a croak. "Beatrice, she's mad. Came here an hour ago waving a pistol, said I'd cheated her of the ruby. Her accomplice, some Indian fellow, knifed me when I laughed at the paste stone." "Where did they go?" Holmes demanded. Langford pointed to a trap door in the floor. "Cellar. There's a boat, smuggler's skiff. Mean to catch the Caledonia at Gravesend." We descended into the cellar, a cavernous space where the river lapped at wooden piles. A small boat bobbed at a hidden jetty, its oars shipped. But it was empty. Fresh footprints led to a side door that opened onto an alley. The sleet had washed them almost away. Holmes stood motionless, listening. From the alley came a faint cry, muffled, feminine. We ran. The cellar, water black as ink, the boat rocking gently. The side door bangs in the wind. Sleet lashes the lens. The alley opened onto Tooley Street. There, beneath a flickering gas lamp, stood Lady Beatrice. Her hood thrown back, silver hair wild, a derringer in one hand and the true ruby in the other. At her feet knelt a slight Indian youth, turban askew, blood soaking his tunic. He clutched a curved knife, its blade crimson. "Stay back!" Beatrice shrieked. "The stone is mine, payment for years of exile while Reginald played the saint." Holmes advanced slowly. "Lady Beatrice, the game is up. The police are minutes away. Drop the pistol." She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Never. The ruby will buy me a new life." She raised the derringer. The Indian moved first, lunging with the knife. Beatrice fired. The bullet took him in the shoulder. He fell, the ruby spinning from his grasp to land in the slush. Holmes darted forward, but Beatrice was quicker. She scooped up the stone and bolted into the maze of alleys. I gave chase, revolver in hand, but the sleet and darkness conspired against me. She vanished around a corner. When I followed, only the echo of her footsteps remained, fading into the roar of the city. The ruby gleams in the mud, blood red, flawless. Beatrice's face distorted with triumph and terror. The alley swallows her. The camera lingers on the fallen Indian, his breath pluming white. We returned to Langford, who had staggered to the warehouse door. Lestrade's men arrived moments later, lanterns bobbing like will-o'-the-wisps. The Indian, Raj Kumar, Reginald's betrayed partner, would live, but Beatrice had melted into London's underbelly like smoke through a keyhole. Holmes stood in the sleet, the paste ruby in his palm. "She has the true stone," he said quietly, "and a 6-hour start, but the Caledonia does not sail until dawn. Watson to the docks." As we boarded a police launch, the bells of Southwark began to chime midnight. Christmas Day had come, yet the shadows of Yuletide stretched longer than ever. Chapter 6. Forgotten Letters. The police launch carved a white wake through the Thames, its engine throbbing like a fevered heart. Sleet had turned to a thin, stinging mist. The river stank of coal, tar, and decay. Holmes stood in the bow, coat collar turned up, eyes fixed on the dark water as though he could read the city's secrets in its ripples. Lestrade huddled beside the helmsman, muttering about Christmas Day arrests and the commissioner's temper. I nursed my revolver and tried not to think of the plum pudding cooling on Mrs. Hudson's table. The launch surges past Blackfriars, gas lamps smearing gold on the waves. Holmes's silhouette sharp against the mist, close up on his gloved hand crushing the paste ruby to powder. We reached Gravesend an hour before dawn. The SS Caledonia lay at anchor in the pool, her funnels already exhaling steam. Passenger tenders ferrying the last stragglers aboard. Lestrade's men fanned out along the quays. Holmes led me to the customs shed where a bleary-eyed clerk confirmed that no lady matching Beatrice's description had boarded. Yet a crate labeled "Spices Perishable" had been loaded at midnight, consigned to Amsterdam. "The ruby," Holmes said, "hidden among cloves to mask its scent from dogs. She will smuggle herself aboard in the hold." We slipped onto the tender with the final mail sacks. The Caledonia towered above us, her decks alive with colored lanterns and the strains of a German band playing "O Tannenbaum." Passengers in fur and diamonds crowded the rails, waving to friends ashore. Holmes's gaze swept the faces, then fixed on a slight figure in a porter's cap and oilskins, lugging a crate toward the cargo hatch. "Beatrice," he breathed. We followed at a distance. The hold was a labyrinth of crates and barrels lit by swinging lanterns that painted the scene in hellish reds and golds. The air was thick with pepper and myrrh, every breath burned the lungs. Holmes moved like a shadow, finger to lips. At the far end, the porter set down the crate and pried off the lid. Inside, nestled in cloves, gleamed the ruby, blood-bright, the size of a walnut, faceted to catch the lantern light like a drop of frozen fire. The hold. Shadows leap as lanterns sway. The ruby pulses in its bed of spices, close up on Beatrice's eyes, wild with triumph, reflected in the stone. Beatrice shed the disguise. Her silver hair was pinned beneath a scarf. The derringer glinted in her hand. "One step closer, Mr. Holmes, and the stone goes into the bilge." Holmes raised empty hands. "You are cornered, madam. The ship is surrounded. Surrender the ruby and your life may yet be spared." She laughed, a brittle sound that echoed among the crates. "Life? In a prison hulk? No, I think not." She reached into the crate and lifted the ruby. For a moment the hold seemed to glow with its light. Then, swift as a striking snake, she hurled it toward the open hatch. I lunged, but Holmes was faster. His stick arced, the ruby struck the tip and spun back into his palm. Beatrice screamed and fired. The bullet splintered wood inches from my head. Lestrade's men poured in, whistles shrilling. She fought like a tiger, nails raking, derringer spitting fire, but numbers overwhelmed her. The ruby, safe in Holmes's pocket, never left his grasp. Action in slow motion, the ruby arcs through the air, Holmes's stick a blur. Beatrice's face contorts in rage, handcuffs snap shut. The hold doors slam, cutting off the dawn light. Back on the quay, as the Caledonia weighed anchor without its fugitive passenger, Holmes examined the stone beneath a lantern. "Flawless," he murmured. "Mogul cut, 17th century, worth a king's ransom, yet it has brought only ruin." Lestrade clapped him on the shoulder. "A Merry Christmas to us all, eh, Mr. Holmes? The commissioner will pin a medal on you for this." Holmes's smile was wintry. "Keep your medals, Inspector. I seek only the truth." He turned to me. "Watson, we return to Baker Street. There are letters yet to read. Forgotten letters that may close this case once and for all." Dawn breaking over the Thames, the Caledonia a shrinking silhouette. The ruby rests in Holmes's palm, catching the first pale rays. Cut to the train north, steam billowing like ghosts. We reached 221B as Big Ben struck 9. Mrs. Hudson had kept breakfast warm, eggs, bacon, toast thick with marmalade, and a packet of letters awaited us, forwarded from Hargrove Manor. They were tied with faded ribbon, the paper brittle with age, the ink browned but legible. Reginald had unearthed them from a secret drawer in the chapel altar while we were gone. Holmes spread them on the table. Correspondence between Sir Reginald's grandfather and a certain Captain Raj Kumar, our wounded Indian's ancestor. Read, Watson. The letters painted a tale of colonial greed. In 1837, during the Afghan campaign, Captain Hargrove had stolen the ruby from a temple in Rajputana, murdering the guardian priest. Raj Kumar's ancestor swore vengeance. The stone was cursed, he wrote, and would drink the blood of every Hargrove until returned. The final letter, dated 1842, ended abruptly. The ruby is hidden where the stag drinks at midnight. Let my son reclaim it when the time is ripe. Holmes tapped the page. The chapel font, carved with a stag's head. Reginald's hiding place before he moved it to the Phoenix. The curse was superstition, but greed made it real. A knock heralded Reginald and Eleanor arrived by the morning train. Reginald was pale but steady on his feet. Eleanor carried a small portmanteau. Holmes handed the baronet the ruby. "Yours by right of inheritance," he said, "but I counsel you to return it. The Maharaja of Jaipur still lives. A telegram to the Viceroy will see it restored. Break the chain, Sir Reginald. Let the stag drink no more blood." Reginald weighed the stone in his palm. "You are right, Mr. Holmes. The spice trade is honest enough without this bauble. I shall telegraph at once." He turned to his sister. "Eleanor, will you come with me to India, a new start, away from these shadows?" She smiled through tears. "Gladly." The ruby on the table, surrounded by yellowed letters. Sunlight breaks through the window, gilding the stone. Reginald's hand closes over it, then opens, offering it back to the light. Yet one mystery remained. Holmes produced a final letter, postmarked Calcutta, received that morning. It was from Raj Kumar, written in a trembling hand from his hospital bed. "Mr. Holmes, the ruby was never the curse, only the greed it inspired. My ancestor's oath ends with me. Tell Sir Reginald the stag may rest. I go to my father's in peace." R.K. Holmes folded the letter. Thus greed devours itself. The holiday case is closed, Watson, though the echoes of the manor will linger. Outside, the snow had melted to slush. Church bells rang for Christmas service. We walked to St. Marylebone, where the pews were packed with fur-clad worshippers and the air sweet with incense. As the choir sang "Hark, the Herald Angels," I glanced at Holmes. His eyes were closed, but a faint smile touched his lips, the nearest he ever came to peace. The church interior, candlelight on brass, children in smocks waving paper trumpets. Holmes and Watson in a pew, snow melting from their boots. Fade to the ruby, now wrapped in silk on its way to India. Back at Baker Street, Mrs. Hudson served roast goose and flaming plum pudding. Holmes raised a glass of mulled wine. "To absent friends," he said, "and to the light that pierces even the darkest yuletide." And so the shadows lifted, leaving only the warmth of the fire and the memory of a ruby that had bled enough. Chapter 7. The Midnight Pursuit. Christmas Day slipped into evening like a thief, and the peace we had earned at St. Marylebone proved as brittle as the ice on the Thames. We had scarcely finished Mrs. Hudson's goose when the sitting-room door burst open and Billy the page boy tumbled in, snow on his boots and panic in his eyes. "Mr. Holmes! Telegram from Hampstead, urgent!" He thrust a flimsy orange envelope into Holmes's hand. Holmes slit it with a butter knife. The message was scrawled in Reginald's hurried script. "Lady Beatrice returned. Armed, Thorn dead, Ruby gone again. Come at once." R.H. Holmes's face hardened. "The stag drinks at midnight after all. Watson, your revolver. Mrs. Hudson, pack sandwiches, cold beef if you please. We travel by the milk train." The telegram trembles in Holmes's fingers. Close up on the words, "Thorn dead." Cut to the sitting-room table. Revolver, dark lantern, railway timetable open at the 7:15 to Hampstead. The train rattled through the suburbs, its windows frosted lace. Holmes sat opposite me, eyes half closed, reconstructing the crime in the theater of his mind. "Beatrice never intended to flee," he murmured. "She doubled back while we chased shadows to Gravesend. Thorn was her weak link. She silenced him. The ruby, our paste replica, was bait. She has the true stone now and means to vanish before dawn." At Hampstead Station, a dog cart waited, sent by Reginald. The driver, a stable lad with chattering teeth, whipped the horse into a lather. We reached the manor at 11:30. The great house stood dark save for a single lamp in the library window. The front door hung ajar, snow drifting across the threshold like a white shroud. The dog cart skids to a halt. The manor looms, its windows blind. Snow swirls through the open door, erasing footprints. Inside, the air was thick with the copper reek of blood. Reginald met us in the hall, face ashen, a Webley revolver dangling from his hand. "She came an hour ago," he said, "demanded the ruby. When Thorn refused, he'd hidden the paste copy in the chapel. She shot him through the heart, took the stone and fled toward the heath. We found Thorn in the servants' passage, sprawled on his back, eyes staring at the ceiling. A neat bullet hole pierced his waistcoat. The paste ruby lay beside his outstretched hand, glittering falsely in the lamplight. Holmes knelt, lens to the wound. Small caliber, Beatrice's derringer. Powder burns indicate close range. She stood thus. He positioned himself above the body and fired downward. Thorn was on his knees begging. "See the bruise on his cheek? She struck him first." Eleanor appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a dressing gown, her face streaked with tears. "She laughed," she whispered. "Said the curse was hers to wield now. Then she ran into the snow." Holmes rose. "The heath. She knows its paths. Smuggler's trails from her girlhood. Watson, lanterns and rope. Reginald, your hunting rifle. We hunt the hunter." Thorn's body, blood pooling like spilled claret. The paste ruby catches the light, mocking. Cut to the arming scene. Holmes coiling rope, Reginald loading cartridges with shaking hands. We plunged into the night. The heath lay vast and white under a waxing moon, the snow crust hard enough to bear our weight. Wind keened through the gorse, bare oaks clawed at the sky. Holmes led, following faint disturbances in the snow. Heel marks, a broken twig, a scrap of lace torn from Beatrice's cloak. After 20 minutes, we reached the frozen lake where Eleanor had skated as a child. Here the trail split. One set of prints veered toward the Spanish chestnuts, the ancient smuggling route. The other, smaller, erratic, led to the ice itself. Holmes knelt at the lake's edge. "She crossed here. The ice is thick, 3 inches at least. But see the disturbance?" He pointed to a circular patch where snow had been swept aside. "She knelt, cut a hole." "Why?" Reginald's voice cracked. "The old well. Beneath the ice, fed by a spring. Smugglers used it to hide contraband." Holmes's lantern revealed a dark circle 6 inches across, freshly cut. He lowered the light. Far below, water glinted like ink. "She's gone under the ice, into the smuggler's tunnel. The well connects to a cave on the far bank. From there, a pony track to the Finchley Road. She'll have a carriage waiting." We skirted the lake, boots crunching. The cave mouth yawned beneath an overhang of roots and earth, half hidden by holly. Inside, the air was warmer, thick with the scent of damp stone and cloves, Beatrice's perfume. Holmes's lantern picked out a trail of blood droplets, hers from a cut hand sustained in the struggle with Thorn. The tunnel twisted like a worm, its walls braced with rotting timbers. After 100 yards, it opened into a natural cavern, its floor strewn with broken crates and rusted iron. In the center stood Beatrice, cloak torn, silver hair wild, the true ruby clenched in her fist. A small traveling bag lay at her feet, a carriage lamp flickered beside it. The cavern, stalactites dripping, lantern light gilding the ruby. Beatrice's face, half mad, half exalted. "Stay back!" she cried, derringer leveled. "The stone is mine, payment for a lifetime of slights." Holmes advanced slowly. "You murdered Thorne for a paste copy. The true ruby is with the Maharaja's agent in London, delivered by Raj Kumar this morning. You hold only glass, madam." For a moment she wavered. Moonlight from a fissure above struck the stone, revealing the flaw at its heart. Her scream echoed like a banshee's. She hurled the false ruby at Holmes. It shattered against the wall in a shower of shards, then turned to flee deeper into the cavern. Reginald raised his rifle, but Holmes knocked the barrel aside. Alive, if possible, she must face justice. We gave chase. The tunnel narrowed, forcing us to stoop. Beatrice's lantern bobbed ahead, a will-o'-the-wisp leading us onward. Suddenly the passage ended at a wooden ladder ascending to a trap door. Holmes climbed first, I followed, revolver ready. The trap door opened into the ruins of an old ice house, its dome collapsed, snow sifting through the broken ribs. Beatrice stood at the far side, silhouetted against the moon, a pony and trap waiting beyond. She raised the derringer for a final shot. Then the ice beneath her cracked. A sharp report like a pistol. The frozen crust, weakened by the spring below, gave way. Beatrice screamed as she plunged through, the derringer spinning into the darkness. The trap snapped shut. Only her gloved hand remained visible, clawing at the edge before vanishing beneath the surface. The ice shatters in slow motion, Beatrice's face frozen in terror. Her hand reaches, fingers splayed, then is gone. The ruby, false, lies shattered on the cavern floor. We hacked at the ice with the rifle butt, but the current beneath was swift. The spring fed the heath's streams. When Lestrade arrived with his men an hour later, they dragged the lake and the well, but found only Beatrice's cloak, snagged on a root, the derringer still clutched in its pocket. Holmes stood at the ice house door, watching the dawn pale the sky. "Justice is sometimes swifter than the law," he said quietly. The curse claimed its last victim. Chapter 8. Betrayals Unveiled. The milk train back to London carried us through a world washed clean. Snow had ceased in the night. The fields lay white and still, the sky a tender pearl. Yet the hush felt less like peace than the silence after a funeral bell. Holmes sat opposite me, eyes closed, the broken shards of the paste Ruby wrapped in his handkerchief. Reginald and Eleanor had remained at the manor to greet the coroner. Lestrade's men tramped the heath, dragging the lake for Lady Beatrice's body. None of us spoke. The engine's rhythmic clatter seemed to echo Thorne's last heartbeat. The train window, frost feathers melting into rivulets. Holmes's reflection overlays the passing landscape. The ruby shards glint like drops of frozen blood. We reached Baker Street at 10. Mrs. Hudson met us with hot coffee and the Morning Post. Among the season's cards lay a thick envelope sealed with crimson wax, the phoenix crest of the gilded hearth. Holmes slid it open. Inside was a single sheet of vellum and a small brass key. The note read, "Mr. Holmes, the order disavows Lady Beatrice. Her madness was no part of our right. The true ruby was never in her possession. It lies where the stag drinks at midnight, beneath the chapel font, as the letters foretold. Claim it before the new moon, or the flame consumes all." Holmes's eyes narrowed. A friend indeed. Raj Kumar, I'll wager, from his hospital bed. The order fears the curse more than the law. He turned the key in his fingers. To the manor, Watson. One last act before the curtain falls. The phoenix seal cracks. Wax crumbles like ash. Close up on the brass key, its wards shaped like tiny flames. We hired a dog cart at King's Cross and reached Hargrove Manor by noon. The house stood shuttered, black crepe already draped upon the door for Thorne. Eleanor met us in the hall, her face composed but eyes red-rimmed. Reginald was with the undertaker. The chapel had been locked since the inquest began. Holmes produced the key. "The font, Miss Hargrove. Your grandfather's hiding place." The chapel was colder than the grave. Snow sifted through a broken pane, dusting the pews. The font, a marble basin carved with the Hargrove stag, stood beneath the rose window, its water long since evaporated. Holmes inserted the brass key into a concealed lock beneath the stag's mouth. A panel slid aside with a soft click, revealing a velvet-lined cavity. Within lay the true ruby, wrapped in oilskin, pulsing with inner fire. The font's secret compartment opens. Light from the rose window strikes the ruby, scattering crimson flecks across the stone floor like spilled wine. Holmes lifted it reverently. "The blood of Rajputana, 17 carats flawless save for the star at its heart. Worth a fortune, yet it has cost 3 lives and shattered a family." He rewrapped the stone and handed it to Eleanor. "Yours to return as your brother wished. The Maharaja's agent waits at the India office." She took it with steady hands. "And the order?" "Will disband," Holmes said. "Fear is a sharper spur than greed. With Beatrice gone and the ruby restored, their flame gutters." Eleanor's fingers close over the oilskin. The ruby's glow fades as though relieved. Cut to the library fire crackling anew. We gathered in the library. Eleanor, Reginald, returned from the village. Holmes and I. A cold collation had been laid. Ham, chutney, Christmas cake still rich with fruit. Holmes poured sherry and began the final reconstruction. "The chain begins in 1837, he said, pacing before the hearth. "Captain Hargrove steals the ruby, murders the priest, hides it in the font. His son, Reginald's father, fears the curse, corresponds with Rajkumar's ancestor, promises restitution that never comes. The stone lies forgotten until Sir Reginald, needing capital, rediscovers it. He smuggles it home inside the mechanical phoenix, planning to sell it through the gilded hearth. Lady Beatrice learns of the plan. Exiled years ago for an indiscretion, she sees the ruby as her ticket to freedom. She recruits Thorne, bitter over unpaid wages, and stages the abduction. The untouched snow. A ladder from the conservatory removed before dawn. The cufflink in the U, planted to suggest struggle. The blood on the scarf. Chicken blood from the kitchen mixed with clove oil to mask the scent. Thorne drugs Reginald, hides him in the chapel crypt. Beatrice attends the gilded hearth ritual to establish an alibi. Reginald, regaining consciousness, swaps the true ruby for paste and conceals it back in the font. Beatrice discovers the switch, returns in rage, kills Thorne for the false stone, flees across the heath. The ice takes her. A poetic end for one who lived by fire. Reginald poured another sherry. "And Victor Langford?" "A red herring," Holmes replied. "Rival, yes, but innocent of murder. His coat thread on the U was planted by Thorne to mislead us." Eleanor set down her glass. "Then all the whispers, the footsteps, the candles guttering, were they Beatrice?" "And Thorne," Holmes confirmed, "moving through the priest's hole behind the paneling. The manor is riddled with passages, smuggler's legacy. They use them to come and go unseen." Flashback montage. Ladder against the U. Thorne planting the cufflink. Beatrice slipping through a hidden door. The priest's hole yawns behind a tapestry. Holmes produced the broken paste ruby. Beatrice died for this, glass and desperation. The true stone returns to India tomorrow. Let the stag drink water, not blood. Reginald raised his glass. "To your health, Mr. Holmes, and to the end of curses." We drank. Outside, the sun broke through, gilding the snow-laden yews. For the first time, the manor seemed to breathe freely. The toast, firelight on raised glasses. Sunlight strikes the stained glass rose window, scattering harmless color across the table. Later, as we prepared to leave, Eleanor pressed a small package into Holmes's hand. "For your museum," she said. It was the mechanical phoenix, its breast repaired, eyes now dull paste. Holmes accepted with a bow. A reminder that even the brightest flame casts shadows. The dog cart bore us back to London through a world reborn. Children pelted each other with snowballs. Church bells rang for evening service. At Baker Street, Mrs. Hudson had kept the fire banked and a kettle singing. Holmes set the phoenix on the mantel beside the gasogene. "Case closed, Watson," he said, filling his pipe, though I confess the ruby's beauty tempted even me for a moment. I smiled. "You, tempted by wealth?" "By the puzzle," he corrected. "Greed is the basest motive, yet the most common. This holiday has reminded me why I prefer the chase to the prize." Chapter 9. The darkened hearth Boxing Day dawned with a sky the color of wet slate. The snow on Baker Street already trodden to slush by the boots of charity collectors and errand boys. Holmes and I had slept late, the previous day's revelations leaving us both uncharacteristically weary. The mechanical phoenix stood sentinel on the mantel, its brass feathers dulled by firelight, a mute reminder that not all curses are supernatural. 221B at dawn, ash in the grate, the phoenix catching stray gleams. Outside, a crossing sweeper scrapes ice. A coster's barrow rattles past with cries of hot chestnuts. Mrs. Hudson brought up coffee and the morning papers. The Times carried a discreet paragraph on page 7. "Tragic accident on Hampstead Heath. Lady of title lost beneath ice. No mention of Ruby's curses or murder." Lestrade, it seemed, had kept his counsel. Holmes scanned the column, then tossed the paper aside. "The official story will satisfy the public. Beatrice's death, an unfortunate slip while walking. Thorns, a burglary gone wrong. The ruby quietly restored to Jaipur. Neat, if not truthful." I buttered a scone. "And the gilded hearth?" "Disbanded, their crypt is sealed. The mechanical phoenix will gather dust in Scotland Yard's Black Museum. Fear of exposure has scattered them like leaves." He rose, restless. "Yet one thread dangles, Watson. Raj Kumar's final letter spoke of peace, but the ruby's journey is not complete. The Maharaja's agent arrives today at Charing Cross. We must ensure the stone reaches him unscathed." Close up on the newspaper. Paragraph. Ink still wet. Cut to a telegram on the table. "Arrive 2:15. Agent Rao, India office." We reached the station at 1:30. The platform thronged with holiday travelers, soldiers home on leave, governesses clutching bandboxes, a brass band playing Rule Britannia for no apparent reason. Holmes's eyes swept the crowd. His hand rested lightly on the dispatch case containing the ruby, now wrapped in oilskin and sealed with the Viceroy's wax. Agent Rao was a slight man in a dove-gray achkan, his turban secured with a modest pearl. He greeted us with a grave bow. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, His Highness is in your debt. The blood of Rajputana returns after 50 years. The temple priest who was murdered, his grandson serves in my household. This restores honor." Holmes handed over the case. "Guard it well. There are still those who covet its fire." Rao's smile was thin. "The curse is broken. The stone goes to its shrine, never to be worn again." He tucked the case beneath his arm and melted into the crowd, escorted by 2 silent sepoys. The handover, Rao's fingers brushed the oilskin. The ruby's glow is imagined, not seen. The sepoys close ranks. The train whistle shrieks. Fade to the platform, emptying, steam curling like incense. We returned to Baker Street through a city shedding its festive skin. Holly wreaths sagged on lampposts. Discarded Christmas trees lay on the pavement like fallen soldiers. At 221B, a surprise awaited. Reginald and Eleanor Hargrove seated by the fire with Mrs. Hudson's best tea service. Reginald rose. We sail for Bombay on the Pembroke Castle tomorrow. The spice trade will be honest from now on. No more shadows. He placed a small cedar box on the table. A parting gift. Cloves from our own plantation, pure, untainted. Eleanor added a photograph. The manor in spring, wisteria cloaking the stone, the yew tree in full leaf. So you remember us in sunlight, she said softly. Holmes accepted both with a bow. The light is always there, Miss Hargrove. Sometimes it needs only a lens to find it. The cedar box opens, cloves dark and fragrant. The photograph glows in the firelight. Eleanor's smile is tentative but real. They departed at dusk, the dog cart's bells jingling down Baker Street. Holmes stood at the window long after they were gone, the photograph in his hand. Watson, he said at last, the case is closed, yet I feel its echo. Greed dressed as curse, betrayal masked as ritual. How thin the line between festivity and funeral. I poured whiskey. But the ruby is gone, the guilty punished or dead. The manor will heal. He turned, the firelight carving shadows across his face. Will it? The hearth is darkened even when the flames burn bright. Come, we have one last task. Night falling. Gas lamps flicker on. Holmes dons his ulster. The dispatch case is empty now, but his eyes burn with purpose. We took a cab to Hampstead under a sky pricked with stars. The manor stood silent, its windows shuttered, but the chapel door was unlocked. Inside, the air was cold and still. Moonlight through the rose window painted the floor in blood and sapphire. Holmes moved to the font. The secret compartment stood open, empty. He knelt, lantern raised, and pointed to faint scratches on the marble, fresh, deliberate. Someone was here, he said. After Rao took the ruby, see the footprint, small, a child's perhaps, or a woman's, and this. He lifted a single clove, dark and perfect. From the box Reginald gave us, someone returned to be certain the curse was truly ended. I shivered. A servant? A member of the order? Holmes shook his head. No, look closer. He brushed dust from the font's rim, revealing a faint inscription carved with a knife point. The stag rests. R.K. Raj Kumar, I whispered, but he's in hospital. Discharged this morning, Holmes said. He came to see the hiding place with his own eyes, to lay his ancestors' oath to rest. The clove, an offering perhaps. The curse dies not with blood, but with forgiveness. Moonlight on the inscription. Letters raw and new. The clove rests in Holmes's palm like a dark tear. Outside, the yew tree sways, branches whispering. We left the chapel and walked the garden path. The snow had melted in patches. The yew tree stood stark against the sky, its branches heavy with memory. Holmes paused beneath it where the cufflink had been found. Here the ladder stood, he said. Here Beatrice climbed to plant her lie, and here. He brushed snow from a low branch, revealing a small bundle tied with twine. A child's mitten, the one lost in the lake search, now filled with holly berries and a sprig of mistletoe. Eleanor's doing, I said. A Christmas gift for the house to replace sorrow with hope. Holmes smiled, a rare, genuine lightening of his features. The hearth rekindled. Let us leave them to it. The mitten sways gently, berries gleam like tiny rubies. The manor's windows glow faintly. Someone has lit the Yule log anew. Fade to the path back to the cab, footprints side by side in the slush. The cab ride home was silent, the city asleep beneath its blanket of melting snow. At 221B, Holmes set the clove on the mantel beside the phoenix. A reminder, he said, that even the darkest Yuletide yields to dawn. I raised a glass. To absent friends, and to the light that finds us all. He clinked his against mine. To the light. Outside, a solitary caroller sang, "God rest ye merry gentlemen," beneath the gas lamp, his voice clear and unafraid. The shadows of the holiday case dissolved with the snow, leaving only the warmth of the hearth and the promise of a new year. Chapter 10. Yuletide Revelations. The morning of the 27th of December found Baker Street bathed in a pale, reluctant sunlight, the first we had seen in a week. The snow was retreating into gray slush. The gutters ran with meltwater, and the air carried the faint, hopeful scent of thaw. Holmes and I lingered over a late breakfast, the table strewn with toast crusts, marmalade pots, and the cedar box of cloves from Hargrove Manor. The mechanical phoenix gleamed on the mantel, its paste eyes catching the light like cheap regret. 221B in soft morning light, steam curling from the coffee pot, the phoenix a silent sentinel. Outside, a knife grinder's wheel sparks on the pavement. A coster's cry of sweet violets drifts up. Mrs. Hudson entered with the post. Among the usual bills and invitations lay a single envelope of heavy cream stock, sealed with green wax, and the impression of a stag rampant. Holmes slid it open. Inside was a card in Eleanor's elegant hand. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, the manor is transformed. The Yule log burns bright. The servants sing. Reginald sails for Bombay this noon. Come if you will to a small farewell gathering at 11. The chapel font is filled with water and white roses. The stag drinks only peace now." Holmes folded the card with a smile. "We are summoned to the epilogue, Watson. Let us pay our respects to the living and the dead." The card on the table, wax seal cracking like thin ice. Cut to the dog cart splashing through slushy streets, Holmes and Watson muffled in ulsters. We reached Hampstead as the church clock struck 11. The manor stood open to the pale sun. Evergreens still draped the portico, but now twined with white ribbons. Servants bustled with trays of negus and mince pies. A fiddler in the hall played a gentle air. The house, so lately a tomb, breathed again. Eleanor met us in the entrance hall, radiant in dove-gray silk. "You came," she said, pressing Holmes's hand. "Reginald waits in the library. The India office telegraphed. The ruby reached Agent Rao safely. The Maharaja has proclaimed a day of festival in the temple." Reginald rose from his desk, thinner but upright, a traveling cloak over his arm. "Holmes, old fellow, words fail me. The spice warehouses are sold. The proceeds will rebuild the village school in Rajputana. No more shadows." He handed Holmes a small leather pouch. "A final token. Open it later." The library, sunlight on polished oak, the ledger closed forever. The pouch is soft, heavy with promise. We walked together to the chapel. The rose window blazed with color. The font brimmed with clear water, white roses floating like tiny boats. A brass plaque had been affixed to the marble. "In memory of those who fell to greed, let peace abide." Beneath, in smaller letters, R.K. 1887. Holmes traced the inscription. "Raj Kumar came in the night then, his ancestors' oath fulfilled." Eleanor nodded. "He left at dawn, bound for Liverpool, then home. He asked that no notice be taken. The curse ends in silence." The font, roses drifting, water rippling. The plaque catches the light. Outside, a robin sings on the yew bough. The gathering was small. The housekeeper, the fiddler, a pair of village children clutching posies. Reginald raised a glass of mulled wine. Two absent friends, Thorne, Beatrice, the priest of Rajputana. May they find the peace they denied themselves. We drank. The wine was sweet with cloves and forgiveness. Holmes drew me aside to the yew tree. "Observe, Watson. The mitten still hangs, but now with a sprig of rosemary." He smiled. "For remembrance, Eleanor's touch. The yew, mitten bright against dark needles, rosemary tucked inside. Children's laughter echoes from the house. Back in the library, Reginald opened the pouch. Inside lay a single clove, perfect and dark, and a tiny silver stag no larger than a sixpence. "From the Maharaja's jeweler," he said. "A charm against future curses. Wear it, Holmes, when the nights grow long." Holmes pinned it to his watch chain. "I shall. Though my talisman is logic, this will serve." The dog cart returned us to London as the sun dipped toward the spires. At Baker Street, Holmes placed the silver stag beside the phoenix and the single clove. "Symbols of a case concluded," he said. "Fire, spice, and the stag at rest. The mantle, phoenix, clove, stag gleaming in the firelight. The sitting-room windows open to a sky turning rose and gold." That evening, as Big Ben tolled 6, we walked to the Strand. The streets were alive with post-Christmas cheer. Omnibuses jingling, theaters spilling light, a Salvation Army band playing while shepherds watched. Holmes paused beneath a gas lamp. "Watson," he said, "the holiday case began with a disappearance and ended with a restoration. Greed sought to darken the hearth, but truth kindled it anew. Let us record the lesson. The brightest flames cast the longest shadows, yet even shadows flee the dawn." I raised my glass, mulled cider from a street vendor. "To the dawn, then, and to the friends who light it." He clinked his against mine. "To the light." The Strand at dusk, lamps flaring, faces aglow. Holmes and Watson silhouetted against the glow, the silver stag catching the light. Fade to the sitting room later, fire low, the mantel treasures arranged like a small shrine. Later, by the dying fire, I opened my notebook. Holmes dictated the final lines. Thus ended the adventure of the holiday case. A ruby returned, a curse dissolved, a family reborn. In the season of peace and goodwill, we were reminded that the greatest gift is not gold or gems, but the courage to lay old ghosts to rest. The stag drinks clear water now, the hearth burns bright. God rest ye merry, gentlemen, and let nothing you dismay. He closed the book with a snap. File it under H, Watson, and pour the whiskey. The new year approaches, and with it new shadows to chase. Outside, the bells of St. Marylebone rang in the evening, clear and joyous. The shadows of Yuletide were banished at last, leaving only the warmth of the hearth and the promise of cases yet to come.